Okay, let's dive right into it. Welcome to this explainer where we're going to unpack Charlotte Bronte's absolute masterpiece, Jane Eyre. Now, at first glance, you might think you already know this story. It's a classic romance from over 170 years ago, right? Well, actually, scratch that. Beneath the surface, it is a dark, gripping psychological thriller. It's packed with this heavy Gothic atmosphere, hidden monsters, and a woman fiercely fighting against a society that literally wants to control her every move.
So just picture this for a second. Imagine you're standing at the altar, ready to start a brand new life, only to discover a betrayal that shatters absolutely everything you thought you knew about the person standing right across from you. Crazy, right? Well, that is exactly where this story is headed. It's a complete gut punch. But to really understand how our protagonist reacts when her entire world falls apart, we can't start at the wedding. We actually have to go back to the very beginning.
Right, so before we get to that shocking twist, we really need to understand Jane's brutal baseline of survival. Her story starts with a cruel, totally loveless childhood. Orphaned as a baby, Jane is taken in by her aunt, Mrs. Reed, at Gateshead Hall. And she's not treated like family, she's treated like a burden. She's bullied, constantly reminded of how poor she is, and even violently attacked by her cousin. And you know what happens when Jane finally dares to defend herself? She's the one who gets punished.
And her punishment is absolutely wild. She gets locked in the terrifying Red Room, which happens to be the exact room where her uncle passed away. So here, Jane is paralyzed by this supernatural dread. I mean, this isn't just a timeout. This room becomes the ultimate symbol of her childhood trauma. Trapped in the dark, she realizes she's stuck in a world that basically demands her silence and submission. But as you'll see, Jane is definitely not a girl who will just stay quiet. So her aunt, desperate to get rid of her, ships her off to the harsh, unforgiving Lowood school.
Now, at this awful school, a really fascinating ideological clash takes place. The conditions here are horrific, honestly. The girls are starved, they're freezing, and they're punished by these hypocritical directors who preach poverty while living in total luxury themselves. But in all this darkness, Jane meets Helen Burns. Notice the contrast between them here. Jane has this fiery spirit, right? She wants to fight back against every single injustice. But Helen, on the other hand, believes in enduring suffering with his tragic patience and forgiveness. They are complete opposites, but they form an incredibly deep bond.
Tragically, though, an illness sweeps through the freezing halls of the school, and in this incredibly heartbreaking midnight scene, Jane sneaks in just to hold her dying friend. Helen's death changes Jane forever. It kind of extinguishes some of her reckless anger, but it fuels this desperate, calculated need to survive. She ends up spending years at Lowood, eventually becoming a teacher, but those restrictive walls really start to close in on her. She realizes she needs to escape. She has to find true freedom and see the world.
Which brings us to Thornfield Hall and a mysterious new home.
So, that thirst for freedom leads Jane to take a job as a governess at a creepy, isolated, and shadowy mansion to teach a young French girl. And it's here she crosses paths with the master of the house, the moody, wealthy, and deeply mysterious Edward Rochester. Now, he's not your typical charming hero, okay? He's brooding, he's sharp-tongued, and he clearly carries this heavy, unspoken burden. But despite their massive class differences, Rochester becomes utterly fascinated by Jane. And why? Because she absolutely refuses to be intimidated by him. She doesn't flatter him, she argues with him, challenges his ideas, and speaks honestly like a true equal. So beneath his abrasive exterior, Jane senses this deeply troubled man, and this unexpected magnetic connection begins to form between them.
But here's the thing. Thornfield isn't just a cozy backdrop for romance. It is literally full of terrifying red flags. First, Jane hears this unnatural, demonic laughter echoing through the halls at night. Then she wakes up to find Rochester's bed completely engulfed in flames, barely saving his life. And when she asks the staff what on earth is going on, she gets nothing but vague, evasive answers. I mean, it's the ultimate bad roommate situation hiding a really dangerous secret locked inside this house.
Yet, despite all these chilling, Gothic mysteries, Jane and Rochester fall deeply, desperately in love. The tension is palpable. Now, society dictates that they definitely shouldn't be together. He has money and status, and she has absolutely nothing. But Jane fiercely believes that money does not determine a person's worth. So Rochester proposes, and Jane, for the very first time in her life, feels like she has finally found happiness, safety, and a place where she truly belongs. They prepare to marry.
And then, the big day arrives. Jane is standing right there at the altar. But right in the middle of the ceremony, a stranger steps forward from the shadows of the church and delivers a devastating blow that ruins Jane's entire world.
He announces to the priest that the wedding cannot go forward. And why? Because Edward Rochester is already married. No way, right? Suddenly, all of those horrifying Gothic mysteries make terrifying sense. The eerie midnight laughter, the unexplained fires, the violent attacks, they were all the actions of Rochester's secret captive wife. Her name is Bertha Mason. She is severely mentally ill, and Rochester has literally been hiding her away in a secret room on the 3rd floor of Thornfield Hall this entire time.
So, the secret is out. Rochester breaks down and begs Jane to stay. He admits his marriage was a tragic mistake and pleads with her to just run away with him anyway. And this forces Jane into the most agonizing choice of her life. Think about it. She can stay, ignore the legal truth, live in comfort, and be with the man she loves as his mistress. Or she can leave, keep her self-respect, but face absolute poverty, loneliness, and a completely shattered heart.
Well, Jane's decision totally defines her character. Choosing her own dignity and moral compass over a lie, she refuses to let her love for a man override her love for herself. So she walks away from the only person who has ever truly loved her. Fleeing Thornfield in the middle of the night with absolutely nothing, she plunges herself into a brutal reality of starvation and homelessness on the unforgiving moors. She would literally rather die free than live as a compromised dependent.
After days of wandering and, honestly, almost dying from exposure and hunger, she is miraculously rescued by the River siblings. They take her in, giving her the one thing she always craved, a real family. And then, in a shocking twist of fate, Jane receives news that her estranged uncle has died and left her a massive fortune. But instead of hoarding it, she divides it equally among her new adopted family. So for the first time in her entire life, Jane Eyre has total financial independence. It's a real game changer. But of course, her hard-won independence is immediately tested. The Strix's highly religious St. John Rivers proposes to Jane. He wants to take her to India as a missionary's wife. But Jane, she sees right through it. St. John doesn't truly love her. He really just wants a useful tool for his mission. It would be a marriage of cold duty, not passion. So Jane refuses him, proving once again that she will not let any man, no matter how righteous, control her destiny. All right, moving into the final chapter, the return from the ashes.
Late one night, Jane hears this strange, almost supernatural voice on the wind. It's Rochester, calling her name in absolute agony. Unable to ignore the pull of her heart, especially now that she's a free and secure woman, she rushes back to Thornfield. But she only finds a blackened, smoking ruin. Thornfield Hall has been burned entirely to the ground. She quickly discovers the horrifying truth of what happened while she was gone. Bertha Mason finally escaped her confinement, set the massive house ablaze, and tragically perished in the flames. Rochester, in a desperate attempt to save his captive wife and the servants, stayed inside as the roof collapsed. He survived, but the fire took a massive toll. He lost his sight, and he lost his physical power. He's now living in a remote, gloomy manor, completely broken and isolated.
So Jane tracks him down to this remote manor, and reunited at last, the dynamic between them has completely shifted. Remember when they first met? He held all the power, the money, and the status. But now Jane is a wealthy, independent woman, and Rochester is a vulnerable, dependent man. Neither of them needs the other for money, protection, or societal approval anymore. And this leveling of the playing field means they can finally choose each other purely, honestly, and exclusively for love.
Jane's journey really shows us that this masterpiece isn't just a romance. It's a profound, defiant statement about a woman fighting a society that tried to break her at every single turn. I mean, she was bullied, controlled, starved, and tempted, but she never, ever gave in. Her greatest victory isn't getting married at the end. Her greatest victory is becoming her own person, completely on her own terms.
Which brings us to the ultimate question that makes this 170-year-old story just as relevant today. Can you love someone deeply without losing yourself? Jane's answer is a resounding yes, but she proves that before you can truly love someone else, you have to learn to fiercely value your own independence first. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer, and I'll leave you with that question to ponder in your own life. Catch you next time.